Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader. I'll be your host today as we talk about the topic of digital transformation, kind of getting to the bottom of it. What does it mean to us? What did it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean today? And we've got a couple of our usual suspects on, and we're joined by an additional compadre who will help us through this. Gentlemen, why don't we start off with some brief introduction, but also kind of your backgrounds, because I want everybody who's watching to kind of know kind of where the angle we're coming from related to this topic today. So just for a reminder, Jason Rader, my background is pretty deep in consulting and in information security. And Andy, why don't you take it next?
Hi, I'm a principal architect with Insight, and I come with an infrastructure background. So I've spent 20 years plus in the data center and running WAN and network and server storage, all that jazz.
Perfect. Amal?
Hi, my name is Amol Asgaonkar. I lead the Intelligent Edge strategy for Insight. My background is mostly in consulting for the last 18, 19 years, working across multiple industries, building solutions. So I've seen a lot of these solutions get built, scrapped, and some of these solutions getting built and just take off and completely change the outcome for the business.
Love it. And Mac?
Hi, everyone. Baldeep Mack here. I'm a senior manager with our transformation office. My background is in PPM and organizational change management. Have been in that space for over 25 years, and I've held various roles within the business, product, and IT verticals. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks for being here. And you have transformation in your title, so you're going to have to be the authority on this. I think it was one of these, this topic kind of came up from a discussion, we're always on kind of gabbing about this in prepping or talking about other things that are going on in the business. And I think when digital transformation comes up, it's kind of like zero trust, which I'm not going to touch right now. But when digital transformation comes up, it's one of those things where I wonder if everybody's talking about the same thing when they say that. That's how we'll kind of preface this. So if you're out there, and we'd love for you to comment on this, but if you're out there and you're kind of wondering what digital transformation means, or maybe you absolutely know what digital transformation means, we'd love to kind of hear from your, what you think. And this will be our perspective for the next, few minutes. But I think it's a worthy conversation to have because from a transformation perspective, this is way more than IT. Is it not, Mac?
It is. I mean, when we think about digital transformation, we also have to think about the people side of change. We have to think about the non-technical stuff, right? And if people are not using it, the changes that we're rolling out, the change is not going to stick, and we haven't been successful.
Absolutely. So we'll come back to that. I do want to say, from an IDG perspective, we have a survey that we just completed, and I'd love for you guys to check it out. It's up on the Insight website. I'll give you guys a reference to that at the end of the show. But in that survey, we asked about digital transformation specifically, and I think that was probably the catalyst for this conversation, right, guys? And in that, it said 9 out of 10 respondents, so 90% of the folks out there are underway in their digital transformation. So with that being said, everybody's fully engaged or at least on what they think. So I'm going to throw it out there right now. Who wants to take a shot at what they think, or, not that you're going to be wrong, but we're going to probably pick you apart. So who wants to go first? I'll let Amal go since he's got the soothing fish tank in the background. He's probably in a good place.
Without the bubbling noise this time. But so in my understanding of digital transformation in all the, consulting gigs that I've done, what I've realized is companies that don't change with time usually lose their competitive edge. And so that change, that the only thing that we need is that change happening constantly and consistently and using a set methodology, right? So one is to change the mindset that things will change, I will have to change. Business will have to change. And so as long as they've accepted that, I've seen a lot of success. So when I think about digital transformation, I keep on thinking of evolution, and you constantly have to evolve, right? We evolve, humans evolve, species evolve, businesses have to evolve. And if they stop evolving, then that is when you start to see, people leaving. There's no change, there's no innovation, and you start to lose business, right? That is how I think of digital transformation is constant change and change for the better, right? There might be certain changes you make that might not work out, but that's okay. You learn from that and you make a change for the better. So that is my understanding of where we need to go. It's not IT, it's not people, it's not just business, it's actually everything.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I love the transformation aspect that you brought up there. And we already talked about from Mac's perspective that it's more than just IT. It's just people. Go ahead, Mac. Sorry to interrupt you.
I was going to say evolution in my mind is a great way to describe digital transformation. There's so many definitions floating out there related to digital transformation, but essentially, when I look at the attributes, I think of it's a new way of operating. I think of the fact that it's not a one and done project. It's a continuous improvement in evolution, as Amal mentioned. I think that, it's the foundation for transformative business outcomes, right? So when we work based on outcomes, and we're outcome driven. And I think it's more than just the technology itself, but it's about philosophy, right? And then of course that last piece of empowering and incentivizing the workforce. And a lot of the digital transformation that we do is for the benefit of our workforce, our teammates, as well as our clients.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so Andy, what I'm hitting you with is we've talked a lot about the transformation part of this. What's the digital part? What's your take on that?
So, it can be different things for different people. I agree with the other two gentlemen that there's that old cliche that the only constant in IT is change. And so the challenge is for different customers and different environments and different industries, there's different parts of the digital assets that need to move. So in some cases, if you're data center heavy, you are going to be modernizing your data center footprint. Like one of the things we're seeing in the last 2 years with the pandemic is people are having to modernize their security and their WAN and their remote access. And we aren't seeing a whole lot of innovation in the offices. Well, we might here in the next quarter or two, but we haven't been modernizing the office space because it's been empty, but we've been modernizing the home office and all of that entails. We were joking about your internet connection a few minutes ago, Jason. But it really depends on the customer and what they're trying to do. Mal and I do a lot of sessions around IoT, and a customer that's trying to innovate at the edge and be modern at the edge has to innovate at the edge. And so the challenge that we have collectively is we can't modernize everything. Both the clients can't modernize everything and we can. So we have to kind of pick and choose where the biggest bang for the buck is with a customer, figuring out, Amal said it in that competitive edge piece, what gives them the biggest ROI on investment? Because we can always be changing everything in technology and in the organization. But if we change the organization too much, it breaks things. If we change technology too much, it breaks things, and so on and so forth. So it really means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on what they're trying to do in an outcome.
And I love that. And I haven't come up with this idea until literally during this session. So this isn't something I came to the show with, but it almost sounds like, digital transformation to a large degree is company transformation. And then we're leveraging the digital, we're leveraging the latest technologies, the latest capabilities to empower the company in that transformation. Is that fair to say? Or
but it's not wide sweeping. It's not boiling the ocean, to use that cliche.
Sure. Yeah, we don't need every technology to change.
Well, and that's the challenge with some of our clients, is that they start changing too much too fast across too much of their environment. It's really picking pieces of your infrastructure, pieces of your operation, pieces of your organization, like Mac was talking about. And we don't need to transform everyone. We need to transform pieces and do it in a very pragmatic way.
And I love what you just brought up, because that's one of the biggest security risks to an organization, is changing a whole bunch of stuff, especially IT type stuff at the same time, because you get a whole bunch of things that could potentially, processes haven't been fully defined, technology is a little shaky, and they want to make it work first. So they enable it to work, but it's not necessarily secure. We just went through this with all the pandemic stuff a few years ago. Wow, it's been a long time. And getting people working from home really well. But then everybody had to enable that to happen, but then go back and secure it a little bit on the back end. And Amal, you mentioned some people kind of transformed and then backed out. And I don't know if my internet's holding up or not, but but I hope it is. But if people were transforming and backing out, what were some of those reasons that they were backing out? I have a feeling that's kind of some of the stuff we've been talking about.
So it was essentially some of the applications, the infrastructure could not hold up when you started to scale it out, right? Because you want to transform, you want to actually transform the entire, let's say, company for a certain outcome, right? You don't change outcomes. Like Andy mentioned, it's all outcome driven. The business says, oh, I want to get there. And then they said, yep, that's great. Let's do that. And they start changing a bunch of stuff. They build new applications, put new infrastructure in place to support and what have you. But then when everything comes together, right? When you say, okay, we're going live with this transformation and there are changes, and then you suddenly think, oops, that stuff is breaking all of this stuff, which is my bread and butter right now, right? And then you start to back out like, hold on, let's take it back a little bit and then break it down into chunks that we can digest, right? So planning in these digital transformations I think it's super important.
And I know I want to, Mac, you probably want to talk right now, and I want you to. So what do you think is the risk of one portion of the organization being all in on a transformation before the rest of the organization's even kind of clued in? Or do you run into that very much? I mean, I'm guessing it's almost
so yeah, I think, just starting the transformation journey, there are some key steps that you have to take. Obviously, planning is a big one, and understanding downstream impacts, upstream impacts that Amal described can be a pitfall for some organizations, but also not jumping to a solution, right? Understanding the why are we doing this?
Love it.
I think gathering the resources, that oftentimes presents a challenge for many companies. We understand where we want to go, but do we have the funding and the resources in order to get there over a sustained period of time? When we think about digital transformation, many of these initiatives are multi-year initiatives. So I think those are all things that, we have to think through in the beginning before we start our journey.
So I want to pile on to what Mac is saying, because this is an interesting topic for me. He did a great job talking about how to start a digital transformation journey, but he also said it's a multi-year, very strategic process for most customers. And the other challenge we have is keeping momentum going. We actually are seeing a fair amount of churn through all the rank and file in a technology sector in a company. CIOs are moving around, managers, directors, down to the architects and engineers. And if we don't have some continuity and some vision that's been defined, a lot of that great work we get started tends to fall apart and loses momentum. And that's probably the second big piece is let's get started, but let's also have a vision that the company buys into and try not to deviate from it too much if we can help it.
And I think the why is super important, right? So Mac mentioned, define the why, and the why actually defines how much continuity you will get and how much force you will have to complete the transformation. So if it's a big, enterprise, but there's a small startup that is eating away at their market much faster than these can react to it, then that's a much better motivation. Like, we're going to get this done, multi-year, but we are going to get this done. Versus a smaller change, a stimulus, which is like, yeah, we should change because we anticipate something will happen in the future. That's less of a motivation to get it done sooner.
I think the why also gives you an idea of what success actually looks like. If we're not transforming just to transform, that's what everybody else is doing. If we're trying to keep competitive with some startups, we can measure market share and we can figure those kinds of things out. Where, if we're just digitally transforming, meaning that we're updating some, and I think people misuse the term. Let's be honest. From a consulting perspective, digital transformation could be we're rolling out a new SAP system. I mean, that's not digital transformation to me. But I think some people like to market this in a certain way. What do you guys think? Am I being fair there or not?
I think so.
I think it's debatable, right?
For 30 years.
It's debatable, like what ERP are they using now versus going to SAP. I think so. That brings up a really good question. What constitutes digital transformation versus what's not, right?
Well, this is more operational in nature. That it's not a thing. It's not a destination. It's a journey.
Yeah. Exactly. But I think Andy brings up a really good point, because when we have sponsors are so critical to any initiative
Totally.
and any transformation that we do, right? Sponsors are the key to success, and our benchmark data 20 years of benchmark data tells us that having an active and visible sponsor is the #1 contributor to success of initiatives.
At what level does that sponsor have to be most effective? Sorry to interrupt.
So we consider it sponsors. We think of sponsors exhibiting the ABCs of sponsorship. So A represents being active and visible. B represents building a coalition of other leaders who can help to propel the change and get bought in so that they're driving it within their own respective organizations. And C represents communication. That's the ABCs of sponsorship. And we want communication because people need to understand, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it now? What's the risk if we don't do it? What does it mean for the business? But not only the business, what does it mean for you? What is the benefit to you? How does it help you in your daily work? How does it help you in your career aspirations? So all of those questions and answers need to be communicated, and the sponsor is an ideal communicator of that information. But we run into a challenge that Andy just brought up earlier, which is we have a lot of churn, right? Especially in this great resignation period, there are people leaving, especially in the technology industry. And how do we manage that? And I think when we talk about the ABCs of sponsorship, the B, building the coalition of other leaders, if one leaves, then we still have these other leaders who can still support and are consistent in terms of the direction we need to go. And I think that helps to mitigate that risk.
That's huge. No, I agree. And I think there's a ton of, I always say this, influence without authority type of thing that has to happen for a transformation to take place. I mean, even if the senior executive in an organization says we're going to do it, it's still a layer or two down where somebody's going to go and reach out across the organization to try to get everybody on board. And, kind of back to, we got 90% of folks that we surveyed that are saying they're on this journey. What are some of the caveats that you think, attrition or people, the great resignation, we've got that leadership thing. What are some of the other things, I think, because we often talk about, I know Andy will say this, the infrastructure guys kind of feeling left out in the cloud journey to a degree, or brought in too late, maybe, into some of that. Would you say that's another major caveat? What are some of the other ones, Mac?
So you bring up a good point. Moving to cloud is operating very differently, and DBAs are, they have to skill up, right? That's the main thing, is they have to skill up. And part of what we want to do in order to be successful on the people side is we want to ensure that there's training plans developed. We're developing coaching plans to help people understand what's changing and what it means for them on a daily basis. I think resistance management is also a big factor that we need to consider. How are we addressing resistance management? And keeping in mind that there's both active and passive resistance, right? Active is good because people are telling us that these are the problems, whereas passive is something you want to kind of keep an eye on because they're internalizing it and it's not being surfaced. I think, sponsor and leadership alignment is another big one. And then I think communicating, those are the key levers in my mind that help us propel change. And I think that, again, specifically to DBAs, I think it's a function of skilling them up and ensuring that you understand what's needed in order to be successful in the cloud, and how their role and their responsibilities pivots in order to support the cloud journey.
Yeah. And I use cloud as an example. I certainly think you can transform, without using the cloud, but it's certainly a great example that we use all the time.
But I find it fascinating, Jason, to interject there. We're kind of talking around technical debt in a different way. And sure. I just did a roundtable with a bunch of CIOs a couple weeks ago. And believe it or not, cloud is becoming technical debt. We've got customers now that are looking at their cloud footprint going, this isn't adequate for what our needs are. We need to be in multiple clouds. We need to be in a different cloud. We need to pull back workloads. So this digital transformation and changing your skills and adapting, which is what Mac is talking about, along with changing your technology and adapting, and changing your operations and adapting. That's kind of this whole thing wrapped up in a ball. Is get used to change. That Who Moved My Cheese book is probably the best manual to digital transformation we could pitch.
And I think that's funny that you bring that up, because that cloud journey was their digital transformation 5 years ago or 10, however long ago it was, right? Now they're saying it's time for digital transformation, but what makes V2 different? I think that's another important, again, how you communicate that out. Because if you're still saying digital transformation, you're going to get some people that have been in the company for a while going, yeah, we did that 5 years ago. How'd that work out? So again, I think that constant communication, to Mac's point, is and showing them what they're going to get, what the value proposition is, and why this transformation is going to continue. And back to an earlier point, because I don't want to lose it, everybody's got to change. It's not just those guys, it's we all have to change. I think that true transformation is everybody's going to have to make some level of change. Everybody's got to transform. And I think that's an important thing. So not just digital, but carbon-based life forms have to transform as well.
And I think the change is not just like, if let's say enterprise A is going through a digital transformation, and now you've got hundreds of these going through digital transformation, you'll start to see that the supporting partners also have to transform themselves to support that, right? So SIs, GSIs, product companies, what offerings they come out with, all of that is essentially, they have to change as well. They have to go through their own transformation for supporting the actual transformation that's happening for their customers.
And Rick, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, Who Moved My Cheese can pretty much go into just about any conversation that we're having these days with folks out there. I mean, it is one of those things where everybody's got to change. We can't just try to go to the same place. And to be honest, what kind of value does that offer an organization? Not trying to put anybody on blast here, but if your thing is just doing the same thing over and over, that's ripe for an automation conversation, in my opinion. It's one of those things where everybody's got to kind of skill up, get to that point to where I think a lot of, especially technical folks, don't understand their value of understanding the way that the business works as much as the technology. That's a huge value to me. I want to keep all of the infrastructure guys. I don't want to outsource to somewhere else. I don't want to outsource my IT because we're using cloud now. That's ridiculous. The folks in infrastructure and IT know how the business works probably better than a lot of folks. And that's they got to understand that value and how it injects back into the business. I think is something they got to do themselves a favor and look into that.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I was just thinking about is showing resolve over time. The fact that these are multi-year journeys. One thing that's extremely important is communicating out that we're still on track. This is the progress that we've made. We're still have the same goals. We still have the same vision. I think that sometimes these types of initiatives can lose some steam if that doesn't happen. So that's one thing that just stood out in my mind as we're talking about, the multi-year journey. I think that's an important factor.
Yeah, I think, and thanks for the comments, guys. It's awesome. Rick kind of just made another comment earlier. We used to all read The Art of War for business and those kinds of things, and thinking about, where that adversary, how we kind of go after business in that respect. I think when we talk about digital transformation, that's that's an internal thing, right? We're kind of our enemy. And I think so again, let me extrapolate this out to kind of get there. But I think it's really understanding, just like you need to understand your enemy from an external perspective, you really need to understand more than, it's not like modular development, right? We need to understand it's not just this black box thing. What happens on the other side of this process? And that whole why, to your point, Mac, really important to kind of bring everything through, because because transformation should be derived from innovation, right? It should be something where we're innovating to do something better, to transform. That's the whole why. We want to get better. Automation doesn't steal your job. It makes those things that you do faster and better and more competitive. That's that's an important why, I think, to those kinds of things.
Yeah, and we need to make sure that, as an organization, we're surfacing these things that people are doing repetitively, right? What are our teammates doing repetitively that could be automated? Unless we ask, sometimes it won't be volunteered.
Yeah.
Right.
And Amal, you brought up IoT earlier. Imagine that. And I think when we're embracing newer kind of tech and techniques, and to be quite honest, things that we couldn't even get to from a processing or technology perspective just 18 months ago. How does that play into somebody who's already been on the transformation journey 4 or 5 years? How do you inject that kind of stuff?
I think when you're transforming, the one thing that you're looking for is data, right? Some kind of feedback from the business of how is it, working. And so with either IoT or edge-based processing or any of those tools in your toolbox that if you deploy will give you better visibility on exactly what's happening, right? And so you don't have to wait for somebody to go collect the data, to then clean the data, to make sense of the data, and then come back after a couple of months and say, here's my report, right? And by that time, business has changed again. So now you're working or making decisions based on 2 months old data. So all of these tools, like whether it's IoT, sensors, automation, all of these are basically giving you data points so that you can make decisions and change while that business is happening then, right? And not working on a quarter-old data. And now if you take a look at that data and say, well, during that time, this is what was happening from an economy perspective. This is what is happening in the market. There was a lot of churn, and all of those will actually affect that or change the data. So you don't want to make decisions based on that data. You want to make decisions based on the data that's coming through right now. And I think all of these technologies, the new techniques of collecting, processing data will really help businesses make better decisions during the transformation, after the transformation, which never ends, but during the stability period of that transformation, still help you make changes and make better decisions at that time.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're getting close to wrapping up time, but I do want everybody to kind of think about for a second while I'm talking. It's obvious 90% of the folks that we surveyed are on some type of digital transformation journey. So assuming that they've got that focus enough to call it digital transformation, what would we each say from our areas of discipline to kind of help these guys out along the journey, so to get them over the finish line, or at least not the finish line, maybe to the next place where they can kind of look around and say, we did this, but we're still continuing to transform on this journey that's probably going to be a loop, at least for a little while, right? Andy, why don't you take that one first?
Well, I'm going to plug what Mac is saying more than anything, is that why is the big one for me too. So even if you're trying to transform infrastructure and the plumbing in your environment, you still need to know why you're doing it and what you're trying to drive in the company, and don't transform for the sake of transforming. We've said that before. Let's transform in a very meaningful, pragmatic way. And I'm a huge fan of that organizational change management concept, because every one of my transformational projects that's failed has failed because of that ABCs that Mac wasn't talking about. We don't have a sponsor that's in the right spot that's driving the initiative. So make sure you understand the organizational why, and hopefully have some air cover and sponsorship around it. Everything, the technology is actually easy in our industry. The people are hard.
Do you still feel there's an infrastructure component that some of the newer stuff that can still enable somebody who's been on the journey for a while?
Sure. I mean, our infrastructure partners are innovating for the same reasons we're talking about here. So storage has gotten easier to manage. Network has gotten self-healing and easier to deploy. Compute has become ubiquitous. Amal and I have talked about how form factors have changed. There's a ton of reasons to implement new technology, but you don't implement them for the sake of new technology. It's always, what's the business trying to do? What's Amal and his team writing that needs this new functionality? And it's really making sure that you have line of sight to that why before you start buying technology and implementing technology. We see the opposite a lot. We see a lot of people that are refreshing a data center to refresh a data center. Why?
There's the why. Amal, how about you?
So if I could be on stage and copy Steve Ballmer, I would, instead of I would be saying data, right? So put a process in place that will collect data and give you that ability to view the data as soon as it happens, right? So you can make better decisions, understand how your transformation is working or not working, and then have data-backed decisions, right? Gut feel is one, but if I can show you that this is what's happening in your business and that is why I made this decision, that is why either it's failing or not failing, right? So collecting data, processing data, and having that infrastructure in place so that you can view the data and make decisions based on it is going to be super helpful. Not just, when you're starting on that journey, even if you're in the middle of the journey, you think you're at the end of the journey or the milestone. Let's say the journey never ends. Your first milestone, data is going to be important. So start collecting that data. It'll help you, maybe not now, but in the next few years, 10 years, you'll be like, whoa, I exactly know how my business transformed throughout these years.
I couldn't agree more. I think literally data has to be a component of digital transformation. I don't think you can transform otherwise. It's your ability to access that data as quick to real time is usually the catalyst for a lot of transformation, I believe. And Mac?
So I think smart companies realize that digital transformation is ultimately about people, whether it's our clients, whether it's our teammates. And I think the human aspect to digital transformation shouldn't just be accounted for. If we want to be successful, it has to be handled with a lot of care. And I think that's important. You need to think about it from the beginning all the way through to the end. Don't make it an afterthought. I also know, based on statistics, based on 2022 years of benchmark data, if we're not thinking about the people side, we have a higher probability of failed projects, failed transformation, failed initiatives. We have a higher probability of exceeding scope, schedule, and cost. We can expect to see lower adoption. And conversely, if we're spending enough time and giving the people side enough love, we're 6 times more likely to meet our objectives. We're 5 times more likely to stay on schedule. We're 2 times more likely to stay on budget, and we're more likely to meet expected return on investment. So don't forget about the people is really the bottom line. That's my point.
I saved you for last because I literally believe it's the people that make this happen, period. That's why I kind of get a little annoyed with the digital as far as the transformation part, because it seems like this digital component is the thing. It's people that use the data. It's people that use that infrastructure. It's the business is run by people, and those things allow us to have that competitive edge to deliver whatever we're delivering as an organization, and it's people. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think a lot of organizations are realizing now that these rock star people that they have working for them are the biggest asset that they've got. It's not their super fat internet pipe or the mountains of data that they've amassed. Yeah. Well, guys, awesome discussion. I appreciate it. And, this seems like something we can talk about for a long time. So we super appreciate the comments that are out there too. You guys rock. We appreciate you contributing, and it was awesome. And feel free to send us some offline if you want to know more about what we do, or if you're interested in us covering a particular topic. We'd love to come back and talk to you about that. If you'd like to know more about what we do here at Insight, please visit us at solutions.insight.com. And we're signing off now. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.